Hi guys, Sir Patrick Vallance served as Chief Scientific Advisor to the UK government from 2018 to this year. During the pandemic, he was one of the top people providing Boris Johnson's administration and the Prime Minister himself with advice on how to deal with the pandemic. The COVID inquiry read out some of the notes he took during his meetings with Johnson, Hancock and others. What they contained was shocking, yet not a huge surprise. Boris Johnson didn't know his behind from his elbow, and even when things were explained to him, he remained bamboozled. Have a listen to this.
So this is an entry on the 4th of May, and by this stage you are making the notes daily, is that right?
Yes.
You say, late afternoon meeting with the PM on schools. My God, this is complicated. Models will not provide the answer. PM is clearly bamboozled. Page 53, please. PM asking whether we've overdone it on the lethality of this disease. He swings between optimism and pessimism, and then this. PM still confused on different types of test. He holds it in his head for a session, and then it goes. Page 93, please. Watching PM get his head round stats is awful. He finds relative and absolute risk almost impossible to understand. Page 124. PM struggled with whole concept of doubling times, just couldn't get it. And then just two more, please. Page 167. This is from later in the year, September. Claire Gardner going through the PM graph, talked PM through the graphs. It's difficult. He asked questions like, which line is the dark red one? Is he colourblind? Then, so you think positivity has gone up overnight? Oh, and oh God, bloody hell. But it's all the same stuff he was shown 6 hours ago. And then finally, 389. This is now going forward to 2021. PM dashboard. Is that a reference to a meeting, dashboard meeting?
Yes.
Taken through the graphs, real struggle to get him to understand them.
My goodness. Now look, let's start off by saying that nobody is expecting Boris Johnson to be an expert in a pandemic. An expert, a scientific expert or whatever. Nobody's expecting that. Nobody was expecting that. But that's why he should delegate to the actual experts. Ignore Michael Gove, who said everyone has had enough of experts. But nobody was expecting Johnson to know exactly how these things worked. That's why he should have listened to the experts. The experts were saying, we need to lock down. And what was Johnson doing instead? He was listening to his backbenchers. The ones who probably have property portfolios and were worried about getting rent. This is who Johnson seems to have been listening to, not the experts. Now, if he didn't understand these things, he should have come out and said, look, Patrick, Chris, I don't understand these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delegate them to you. I'm going to take your advice. You say we need to go into a lockdown, we'll go into a lockdown because I don't understand these things. See, this is the difference between Boris Johnson and an average person on the street. Most people are ignorant of these things. But if the experts say you should do X, generally people will do X. Boris Johnson was ignorant, but also arrogant. He didn't know what was going on, but instead of actually listening to the experts and following their advice, he was thinking about himself. Oh, look, if I go into a lockdown, there's a risk that it's going to upset a few backbenchers, and then I'm going to, maybe lose my position or be undermined. Boris Johnson had no problem with removing the whip from Conservative MPs who disagreed with him on Brexit. He could have easily removed the whip from MPs who were undermining his position when it came to the pandemic, but he didn't do that. Either because he agreed with them or he was a coward. I don't know which it is. But here you have it. He didn't understand what was going on. And instead of admitting it and saying, look, I have no understanding of this. I don't know what the hell these figures mean or how these models work. And we're not expecting him to understand everything. But if you don't understand something, especially as you're the bloody Prime Minister, you need to point that out. You need to say, look, I don't understand this. I'm going to delegate the responsibility to you, or I'm going to allow you to make the decisions and then I'll back you up. That's what Johnson should have done, but instead he was always looking over his shoulder at his backbenchers. And then he turned it into a sort of race. And I criticised it at the time. I said, we're not in a race. We should all be working together to deal with this pandemic. Johnson was talking about how Britain was the first with the vaccine, then the first out of lockdown, and then the first to get rid of masks, and the first, as if it was some sort of game. A political game. He was treating it like he treats Parliament. A debating shop. Just, it's all a massive game to him. It always was a game to him. He didn't care about the public. He didn't care about the heavy lifting of leadership. He just wanted to become Prime Minister so he could put it on his knock it off his bucket list. That's what I think it was all about. Didn't care about the public, didn't care about protecting the country. When it came to protecting the country, the Brexiteers, including Boris Johnson, had no problems with leaving the borders open. They kept criticising, previous administrations for not closing the borders to asylum seekers. But when it came to the pandemic, they wanted to leave the border open because they cared more about business than they did about people's lives. Look at what happened to care homes. Look what happened with the PPE, giving contracts to their mates, giving contracts to donors instead of actually giving them to companies who actually produced PPE. An absolute charade. And Johnson didn't know his arse from his elbow. And instead of taking a step back and saying, I don't know what's going on here, Chris, Sir Patrick, let me know what you need and I will provide you with that support. Tell me what to say and I will say it, because I don't know what's going on. But he was too arrogant. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.